Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our second admissions panel of the day for CentreCourt, our MBA festival. We have four terrific schools, incredibly different from each other in incredibly different places, which I love because it just shows you the incredible and remarkable diversity of graduate management education and all the options you have available to you to get a quality world-class MBA. Let's start from all the way on the right. And I don't know if everyone who is watching actually sees the screen the way I'm seeing it, but let's go to Miami, that warm and wonderful place in Florida in the United States. We have Kim Migoya. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
Kim has been with us in the past, and if you've attended some of our CentreCourt events before, you'll be charmed by her for sure. She's director of graduate business admissions and recruitment. And next to Kim is a very familiar face to all of us as well, Indiana University, Kelley School of Business, Jim Holmen, who directs the admissions and financial aid group at the school. He's got some very exciting news about the growth in the applicant pool at Kelley this year, which confirms all of what we've been saying for months upon months about how this year is going to be one of the most competitive application seasons ever. I have another good friend who we've known for many years who has attended our in-person events, Brandon Kirby of the Rotterdam School of Management. Brandon is in charge of everything: sales, recruitment, admissions, marketing. So he knows the school inside and out, and it's always fun to see Brandon. And we have an artist as well on our panel, Luis Sanchez Villa. And look at that wonderful painting behind him. He did that when he was a very young man, probably a teenager, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, more or less.
And Luis is in one of my favorite cities in the world, really a beautiful and charmed place, Barcelona, Spain.
No, it's Madrid.
Oh, you're in Madrid.
I'm in Madrid. So yeah, I'm sorry for that. I travel a lot to Barcelona, but at present I'm in Madrid.
Well,
which is wonderful anyway.
And I need to tell you, I stayed in Ava Gardner's suite in Madrid, and boy, was it a magnificent stay not that long ago. I don't know if many of you know, I'm a rabid Frank Sinatra fan, so staying in Ava Gardner's suite was a really special treat for me. And Luis is with ESIC Business School. So, the first thing I want to do is give people a sense of the landscape right now. Can you talk us through the recent months and sort of the latest intake and the projections for the coming year? Luis, let's start with you.
Okay. I'm not as happy as Jim with the percentage of students he's got already. I mean, the year, last year has been very difficult because of the COVID-19. Most of our students are international students. So with all those mobility restrictions, I'm afraid it's going to be tough because the decision for some of our candidates is going to be difficult. I mean, today, they don't know how the mobility will be in some months as well. Half of our master is abroad, either in China or in Miami. So until the moment that COVID-19 situation is a little bit better, I think we are going to have a quite tough time for recruitment new students. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult.
And mainly it's because of international travel restrictions.
That's
right?
it. Yeah, that's it. Especially because half of our master is in China, and the restrictions in China. I mean, simply they don't get visas, so it's impossible. There's no other way. So this is the situation today. We hope with this vaccine and everything, the situation will improve shortly, and that will allow us to return to standard numbers. But this is not the case today.
Right. How do you, when you look forward and you look at the fall of this year, do you, and I know it's going to be, your answer has to be speculative because there are lots of things that are unknowable, but do you have any sense of confidence that things will be closer to normal in the fall?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I prefer to be straight clear with this. Fortunately, our MBA does not start until September, late September. We don't have a summer call. So probably for September, the situation will be a little bit more clear, but not today.
Right.
Not today. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that honest answer. Brandon, what's it look like at Rotterdam?
Yeah, so for us, we start in January. So our cohort just started around a month ago, and we experienced a significant increase in application volume as well. Actually almost doubling application volume, which was, we expected a bump because we'd seen it with a lot of our European colleagues at other schools, but we were happy with that. We had a lot of deferrals, as you can imagine, for some of the reasons that Louise was mentioning. We're lucky in the Netherlands because students who come in on a student visa are actually exempt from any of the travel restrictions. They still have to quarantine, but they're able to enter the country. So in the end, we ended up with 152 students, which was pretty much what our target was. And about 95% of them were actually in Rotterdam for the beginning of the program. Like most of Europe, we are still locked down. So we are running our courses in a virtual setting. But the plan is to bring them back onto campus as soon as we're allowed to. There's actually a press conference in about the next 40 minutes. They'll sort of lay out what the next few weeks look like for us. As we look out into the future, we just had our first round close 2 weeks ago. So we were, application volume was up slightly by double digits over last year. And this was, if I think back to last year, this was the last sort of pre-corona round that we had. After that, everything went bonkers and it was, full on corona time. I think Europe is admittedly slower in general than most other parts of the world as it comes to vaccination. So I'm not 100% sure when we can expect for the total population to be immunized against everything. But I'm still hopeful because we start in January. So we have the benefit of a little bit extra time in the September start. Although it did cause some challenges for us for other reasons starting in January, but I think that I'm still optimistic and interest level has remained relatively high for us. So far, so good.
That's great. Now, Jim, I know before we went on live, you gave an astounding figure of the increase in apps. I don't know how you're still alive after dealing with all that. But why don't you share that data and your overall take
Sure.
with the audience?
Sure. Well, we have experienced a 70% increase in applications comparing where we are today to where we were a year ago. But looking at the past year, we did end up bringing in a smaller class this past fall, partially by design to allow us to maintain social distance in the classrooms. Indiana University and the Kelley School worked incredibly hard to create a safe and healthy environment where we were able to have our first year students go through their core experience in a face-to-face setting. And so we were really pleased with that. Indiana University right now is operating under the hopeful assumption that we will be able to return closer to normal in the fall. But considering that we were able to, through a hybrid model, have face-to-face classes this past year, even in the height of the pandemic, we feel confident that we'll still be able to provide a face-to-face experience. Our international class in the first year did come in a little bit smaller this past year, and we had more defer, but fortunately they were eventually able to arrive in Bloomington to have their experience. So again, we're hopeful. We're returning to the typical entering class size for this next fall. And we're working hard to make the best decisions we can. So cautiously optimistic.
And in that flood of new applicants, are you seeing a lot of international candidates?
Yeah, actually, the increase in international applications is actually even a little bit higher. Our international applications have increased by 82% currently. And it's a very diverse international pool as well.
Yeah.
But for an applicant, I think it's important not to focus so much on the competition. Don't worry about the other applicants. If the time is right, put together the best application you can and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm imagining that the even larger increase in the international pool is a function of Joe Biden and the sense that there'll be a more welcoming attitude in America to students from other countries, as well as a better situation with work visas when people graduate.
Yeah, and we're certainly seeing, a fair share of candidates whose employment situation has changed because of the pandemic, and so they're at a point where it makes sense to consider going back as they're perhaps out of work currently.
Right, exactly. And Kim, at Miami, the Herbert School of Business, what's it look like?
Yes. So we are experiencing an increase as well in terms of the applications. Last year, following this time, we experienced a significant increase because of the pandemic for our MBA programs. And with that, nearly doubled the size of last year's intake. We did experience, as many of my colleagues here have mentioned, it was challenging for international students. And so we did experience a decrease last year in terms of the international students entering into that first year cohort. This year, we're seeing quite a jump. And I think, you hit it right on as far as the change in administration. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. We, at this stage, with about 25% increase in our overall applications, we're seeing a pretty strong mix. Above 30% of those are international, and of those, very healthy mix, very diverse, coming from about 20 or more different countries as well. So, which is more representative of our traditional, our normal, intake. So it's good to see. It's good to see that returning. We were very fortunate that we were able to bring in the technology this past year to equip the classrooms where they were all audio, video capable for the students to be able to join virtually. So that was, part of it was a solution that we had for those who were already enrolled, planning to come from outside of the country and were unable to make it here in time for the start in August of 2020. They were able to join remotely until they could, actually arrive to Miami. So we were very excited to welcome them as they officially made it here on campus. So, and we've continued with that format. We've been able to maintain a little bit of a hybrid where the students are in person. We have, of course, extensive safety measures in place on campus, but students also have the flexibility where if either they're concerned, if they don't feel comfortable going in and being in the classroom, they have the option to live stream to join virtually and engage in that manner. And we will continue to make that available. Our goal, hopefully, come this upcoming fall for August 2021, we think things are moving in a better direction. Of course, it's still much too early to say for sure if we'll be able to move away from the hybrid format. But the positive thing again is having the measures in place to be able to offer those options to our candidates.
Right, that's great. What does the class profile look like on the latest intake in terms of international makeup, diversity, and other factors that people look at when they look at a class profile? Age, work experience, gender splits?
Definitely. So for our recent incoming class, it was a very healthy mix of, in terms of gender, about 45% female students coming in. International mix, as I mentioned, we did experience a decline. It was a little over 15%, where normally we do average closer to about 30% of the class as far as international candidates. For the professional work experience, it was just about 3 years of post-undergraduate experience students coming into the program. And in terms of, I think, what other criteria? Anything else, John?
Are you waiving Gmats and GREs or not?
That's a good, for 2020, we did make that exception across the board. I think many, institutions made that determination with test centers closing. For this year, we have reinstated that requirement. And so, but at the same time, allowing some flexibility where the committee is able to consider requests on a case-by-case basis, really looking to other strengths in their application, they may be able to waive that requirement.
Right, great. And Luis, your class profile for your last intake, what does it look like?
Yeah, well, that depends a lot, John, because we have got 3 different versions of MBAs.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, we've got the executive MBA. The profile there is average age can be something like 30, 32. High working experience, 10 years or even more. Then we got let's say the standard MBA, which is the age is lower, around 27, 26, 27, 3 years experience average, 50% male, 50% female, and then the international MBA. In the international MBA, we've got people from average age should be around 30, most international students, 60% women, and with around 10 years working experience. Yeah, so it depends on the version.
On gender parity.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever the reason is, I think women are going to run the world in some few years, because 5 years ago, the average of women in the classroom was around 20%, let's say 20, 25%. Today, 50, 60, at least minimum 50.
Wow, that's remarkable, really. There are very few schools in the world that are 50-50 or even 60-40.
Yeah, but as I'm telling you, I mean, the progress of women in this kind of courses has been tremendous in the last years.
That's great to see. And I see your cat is nuzzling you, I think, which is lovely. What's the name of your cat?
Oh, yeah, he's there. Yeah, you're right. He's sleeping. Stanley.
Okay. Brandon, you're the class profile for your latest intake last January. What did that look like?
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned before, it was 152 students. Average age is around 30, with about 7 years of work experience. And this year we had 44% women in the class. So we had 67 business women in the program. So we're creeping towards parity every year. So I think that's something we always, like most schools, work on. I think it's very competitive, and I think now is a great opportunity for women who are looking to do their MBA, now, because there are a lot of schools who are looking to welcome them into their program. So it's actually a very competitive sort of space, I think. So which is a benefit for anyone who's watching to know that. And we are usually, and this year is no different, 99% international. We actually have, of course, the Netherlands, 17 million people, very small country. So the domestic attendance of a full-time MBA program is usually 2 to 3 individuals, because of course they want to get that experience elsewhere. And we had, I think off of memory, it was 45 different nationalities out of that group of 152. So it's been a very similar mix year over year. We did also offer some Gmat alternatives last year. We will be returning back to requiring a Gmat or GRE this year. Interestingly, I think that's partly obviously why a lot of schools did see perhaps an increase in application volume. But I think it's important to note that what we saw, at least, is that there wasn't a dip in quality. It was people who might not have applied otherwise. Either they were afraid of how they would test, or maybe they didn't have time because they were working, in the consulting or finance field.
Sure.
So we had individuals who even said, look, I normally wouldn't have applied not only at RSM, but to business school in general. And so it's interesting to see how schools have always wondered what would happen if the GMAT wasn't, playing such a central role in the admissions process. And I think this year we got a chance to see potentially what the future could look like, if there were alternatives in place. That being said, we're going back to kind of pre-COVID times and requiring a GMAT or a GRE.
Now, here's a question, and it's related to what we just discussed, so I'll bring it up now. And the question is, has the quality of the overall cohort been impacted when GMAT or GREs are waived? My sense is that it really hasn't been, but what's yours?
I think if as a school, if the only thing you're using is the GMAT to sort of assess the quality of a candidate, you're already set up for failure in a way anyway. We also use video assessment tools. We have the interview process, of course, and other things to assess the soft skills. We did bring in some pre-course work during the admissions process to sort of replace, if you will, the GMAT. So it wasn't as if students were allowed to enter the program completely without anything. We did have some waivers for PhD holders. We had some waivers for individuals with high undergraduate grades that could prove, prior performance, at least for us. Now, if we had grown our cohort to be 300 people, I think then you could really start asking the question like, well, did you just open the doors and let anyone in? And the answer is no. I can understand oftentimes, even in the P&Q forums, there's always discussion around GMAT, and it's a very passionate discussion oftentimes. I think if anything, it opened it up to people who would have been scared to apply otherwise. I mean, all of us as admissions professionals are on the road a lot, and we do these events, and you figure of the people we speak to, maybe only 20 or 25% of them ever actually apply. And so I think what you're seeing now is by removing the GMAT, or at least setting it as one particular path, you're getting a much more diverse set. Doesn't necessarily mean less quality. It's just people that, quite frankly, might not have ever even considered going to business school. So I think the long-term impact of that will be positive, because they will have those stories after they graduate, and hopefully we'll see a broadening of the pool of people who are considering going into higher education through graduate degrees.
True. And to be fair, I mean, many test centers have been closed in those early days for that intake. It took a little while for the organizations to put together online at-home exams. The early iterations of those exams were compromised by technical problems that caused test takers a lot of additional anxiety, above and beyond the anxiety you feel when you have to face a test like that. So I think it was very humane for many schools to say, hey, look, it's not as important. We'll put more emphasis on the interview. We'll put more emphasis on your GPA, which after all is a 4-year record in most cases of your academic performance. And we'll weigh those a little more heavily in lieu of a GMAT or a GRE if you can't take it, or you're at home, you're surrounded by family, you don't have a private space, your broadband isn't very good. And then the UPS guy comes to the door, rings the doorbell, and it crashes. I mean, I think schools exhibited a tremendous amount of compassion, frankly, in extending flexibility in admissions processes last year after the pandemic hit. Jim, you already mentioned that your class was a bit smaller to maintain the school's high standards. What did it ultimately look like?
So we ended up with a class of 92, and that compares to the current second-year class. It was 135. And that is our target for this next fall as well. I admire the female enrollment that Kim, Lewis, and Brandon shared. We aspire to that someday. Our female enrollment in the first-year class is 35%. International students comprise 23% of the current first-year class, and we're typically more around 35, 36% international. So the pandemic definitely took a hit on our international enrollment. Average age was 29, 5.5 years on average of work experience. Minority candidates represented 29% of our enrollment, and that included US underrepresented minorities and Asian Americans. Looking at just underrepresented minority candidates, they were 10% of our entering class. So a solid class. We, for the next entering class, are granting the opportunity for people to apply for a GMAT waiver. It's not a blanket waiver, but they can apply, and we look at their academic record and other factors to determine if we will grant them a waiver. And at this point, we do anticipate continuing to offer that opportunity to apply for waivers for the next cycle as well.
And, I should mention that there are a lot of people in the MBA applicant pool who have undergraduate degrees in rigorous disciplines. Could be STEM, could even be something else. And they have coursework where they have excelled in quantitative, statistical, math courses. So you could have some assurance that Is a GMAT GRE absolutely necessary in those cases? Probably not. Or you're in a job where you're doing modeling or quant work, or you graduated from an institution that is known to be really hard to get into and to get out of. And then, of course, any terminal degrees. A lot of MBA applicants have master's degrees already, and some of them actually have terminal degrees. I think people can be relatively assured that a GMAT or GRE might be nice to have, but it's not a necessary item to really decide whether or not someone can complete the core curriculum. One interesting question that's also cropped up that's kind of related to what we're talking about is obviously deferrals were high for many schools because of travel restrictions and decisions by some students not to want to do a hybrid or online program. Will that impact the size of your intake number this coming fall, or in Brandon's case in January, or not? Now, I know in Jim's case, you expect the school to go back to about a 135 intake from 92. Clearly, that's also a function of the big increase in the applicant pool. Even go above 135?
A little bit. We are limited by the seats in the class and in the classrooms. Maybe 150. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, because if you have really great candidates, and you can accommodate them. Of course, one of the difficulties is the section rule, right? So, a section is can be sizable, and traditionally one would want a whole new section, and that poses all kinds of logistical problems and issues from available professors to teach, particularly in your integrated core curriculum, as well
Exactly.
as placement and employment at the end of the road. So, and Kim, what would you say would be the key differentiator for your MBA program? And we're going to go through all this so that people know how differentiated each of these programs indeed is.
It's a great question. So I would say, refer to it as the Miami advantage. We talk about location, being situated in Miami, where we are truly at the crossroads of the Americas. There's a lot to be taken advantage of. Just some of the kind of key highlights, the fact that we are a very international city. For those who are looking to study specifically in the US, we are considered the #1 most international city by the US Census Bureau. We, in recent years, have been recognized as the #1 for startup activity, #2 for international banking. We're home to very diverse, populations. So, individuals here in South Florida representing more than 100 countries, many that are coming from different areas around the globe. And we find that we, see that represented in our classrooms as well. But I mention that because it is also the market where you're studying, and the exposure, the opportunities that are built in either within the curriculum or through some of those extracurriculars, whether it's the student organizations you get involved with, through the sessions that are hosted by career services or career advancement team, where they're bringing together, these companies, these professionals that are based here. We are home here in Miami, home to more than 1,400 multinational companies, home to their Latin American headquarters right here. So again, that really opens up a lot of opportunity for collaboration and for connections for our students. As I mentioned, whether that be part of the curriculum, we have consulting projects that are built in, and just a lot of exposure. And in terms of the Miami advantage, I know we touched on it before, but the weather doesn't hurt either. So
those swaying palm trees on the beach, aren't they? Luis, what would you say is the main differentiator for both for your mainstream MBA program and for your international MBA?
Yeah, definitely. For the international MBA, the 2 continents. I mean, the possibility of following the MBA in 2 different continents so different than Madrid and China or Madrid and United States. I mean, it's the key differential point, and in fact, is the most attractive part of the master for our students. Definitely it is.
Now, how do you divide the coursework in each of two countries? How does that work?
Yeah, they stay in Madrid from September up to February, and then they move after the Chinese New Year, they move to China up to July. So it's almost 50-50 or 60-40, something like that. Yeah.
And where in China?
In Shanghai.
Okay, Shanghai. Right.
Yeah, they love it. I mean, Shanghai is one of the most funniest cities in the world.
I love Shanghai.
Beautiful place, funny, interesting. Yeah. So I should say that's the key point.
And it's same thing for the United States, right?
Yeah, with the United States, we have just started. So next year will be the first intake, and I hope it's going to be very successful as well, because it is Miami. So and Miami is a pretty attractive place, as Kim said before.
Yes, and it truly is the gateway to Latin America, where you have both economies that are still emerging,
sure,
as well as a very established, massive economies,
yeah,
and a great wealth of opportunities in the future for economic growth in Latin America. Brandon, what would you say is the big differentiator for your MBA? And I know what you're going to say before you say it, and it has to do with the United Nations, does it?
Well, yeah, that is true. I was going to say, actually, it's the weather. I mean, clearly, when people decide they want to go to the Netherlands, they say, you know what, it's really about the weather. Interestingly, though, this past weekend, we were at the beach because it was in the high 50s. But
Really?
The weekend before last, we were literally skating on the ponds. So it just goes to show that within 7 days, global warming aside, that some interesting things can happen in the Netherlands. No, it is definitely not the weather. Our mission statement, I think, is something that does set us apart, and that is that we are a force for positive change in the world. And as John mentioned, that is based on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals put forth by the United Nations. And this was something that we instituted late 2017. So we've sort of been underneath this banner for quite a few years now. It's been integrated into the program, not only in sustainability and things that you would expect, but also in the projects that we do. We have a very specific project at the end of the program that revolves around picking an SDG and working to solve and work on some of those challenges. So I think that is something that when people also learn about our diversity and how many students that come from around the world, that is definitely something that sets us apart. And then I think the final thing isn't necessarily about the program itself, but about the outcomes. About 85 to 90% of our students stay in Europe after graduation. So we're actually third in the world for international mobility. And so if you come from Brazil, you study in the Netherlands, a vast majority of our students will stay in the Netherlands. It is the best non-native English-speaking country in the world at the moment, which is why I can be an American who, speak een beetje Nederlands, but not a lot, and can live and work here. And so for those students who are looking to have that European experience after graduation, we're definitely one of the major players for that, especially after Brexit, if you want to be on the continent. And interestingly, we have seen even this year compared to the past 4 years during the different administration, we've actually had more applications in the first round compared year over year from people from the United States. So it's interesting to see that despite that change, there's still an interest in coming to Europe. So location, force for positive change, and then also the outcome of staying in Europe afterwards.
And Brandon, remind me where you're from in the United States.
So I was born in Tennessee. I grew up in Connecticut, and then I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for 16 years before moving to the Netherlands almost 5 years ago. So I'm an East Coast guy. Depending on if I get pulled over up north, I'm a Northerner. If I get pulled over by the cops in the South, I'm definitely from Tennessee. So I've been all over.
You must have moved to Connecticut at a very early age because there's no trace of a Southern accent in you.
I have a pretty neutral accent now, and that is true because I did get beat up a lot on the playground when I went up and had that Southern accent. It didn't take me long to lose it because otherwise, it was some bruises. So I did get rid of it pretty quickly. So now it's relatively neutral. Yeah, true.
Jim at Kelley, what would be your key differentiator? Obviously, we talked a little bit about the integrated core curriculum, which is different. There's a lot of team teaching in it.
Mhm.
But what would you identify as your key differentiator?
You know, we have such great success with career changers, and a lot of that is because of the coaching and development that we offer. Our program starts with a experience called Me Inc., Me Incorporated, which allows our students to really do a lot of self-reflection, learn how to tell their unique story, how to build their personal brand. It allows them to start their MBA from a position of knowledge about themselves, which allows them to make even better decisions as they navigate all the possibilities in the program. But again, a great focus on coaching our students and helping them develop their skills. Our students have an academic advisor, a career coach, a faculty member that works with them based on their functional interest, and a peer coach, a second-year student assigned to them in the first year. So each student has a team of advisors that works closely with them. And the other thing I'll mention is just the hands-on learning opportunities. We have MBA academies that students join based on their functional interests that really bridge the classroom experience and their future career, live consulting projects, both domestic and international, that allows people to really prepare well for their internships and future careers by learning how to apply what they're learning in the classroom to the world of work.
Yeah, and I might add, you know, all of your coaches are certified coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And Kelley actually has one entire building dedicated to career management, career development, and recruitment. And it's interesting to go into the lobby of that building. It's like going into a train station because there's like one of those magical boards that tell you where to go when your appointment is up for a recruitment interview with a potential employer. It's kind of fascinating.
We take career to development, career management, and career coaching very seriously at Kelley.
So now there are two different types of people in our audience. There are people who are still thinking about applying now for fall matriculation, or in Brandon's case, January, in which case they have a bit more time. And then there, of course, there are the early birds, the people who are already, you know, they're studying for the GMAT and their GRE, and they're thinking about round one, you know, in the fall instead of matriculating. But for people who want to apply still now to get into the fall classes, is it too late or not? And what advice would you give them right now to sort of get their act together quickly to put together a good application? Kim?
Yeah, so it's certainly not too late. We, right now, for programs that are beginning in the fall, our full-time MBA begins in August. We are mid-cycle. We're approaching our third round application deadline on March 1st. The final deadline is May 1st. So there is still time, but my advice would definitely be to start now. You want to begin the application, as I've mentioned, and as some of my colleagues have mentioned, you know, depending on the programs that you're looking to, there may be flexibility in terms of that test requirements. And I think that's where a lot of that apprehension and sort of the delay comes from when you start to think about preparing for the exam. So it may be worthwhile, particularly, you know, if you have strong academics in terms of your previous, your undergrad or other graduate studies that you've completed, professional experience, strong industry experience. Those are some of the different components that may be considered in determining whether that GMAT requirement could be waived. So I would certainly recommend to start those conversations, start your application so you can submit and work through an initial review in order to determine if that requirement can be waived. The sooner the better. If we, you know, if it's determined that you do still need to submit that test score, then having the time to still prepare and to plan for that, we would work with those individuals to map out what that deadline, what that time frame would be.
Right. Luis, there's plenty of time to apply, right, for fall?
Oh, yeah, it's time, but our groups are very narrow. I mean, we have got around 25, maximum 30 students per class. So even in the tough times as those are, I mean, the spaces are limited. So I will encourage everybody to book as soon as possible. Even we offer some benefits for those enrolling earlier in terms of discounts or things like that. So, I believe that in the past, probably the MBA was a plus for any student. Today, if you want to develop your career at senior level in management, the MBA is a must. The soonest you do it, the best.
Yeah, exactly. And Jim, your last deadline is when?
We have one coming up, our third round, March 1st, and our final deadline is April 15th. And it is not too late for domestic candidates and U.S. permanent residents. And while international students can apply in our final two rounds, we typically encourage international candidates to meet one of our first two rounds. And if an international candidate's MBA can wait and they haven't started the process, they might be better served, for us at least, to wait and apply in one of our early rounds next year for fall 2022 admission, given our current international application situation. But definitely not too late for domestic candidates.
Right. And it's certainly not too late for anybody who wants to go to Rotterdam, because you only passed your round one deadline.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we just kicked off the programs, like I said, like 6 weeks ago. So there's definitely still time. And I think for those in the audience, the benefits for applying early to a program don't necessarily, a lot of times you think that, oh, it's better for the school to know, and that might be true. But it also, in the case, if you're looking to switch countries, like many of our students are doing, the earlier you apply, the easier you can set up your exit from your work, from your family, saying goodbye, having time to plan, save money and everything else. So we always recommend to apply as early as possible for that reason, if for no other than just to be able to plan your life. I mean, we do have students who literally will apply in the last round. They'll find out, maybe 3 weeks even before the program begins, because our last round is actually in November for a January start for European citizens. We've had people who have been accepted with 3 weeks to go, quit their job and show up to campus. I mean, it's insane. Not the ideal way to start a very stressful, roller coaster ride of an experience. So the earlier you apply, it's actually better, I think, for the candidate as well, just so that they can get their life in order before they make that big transition into school.
And generally, if people are looking for scholarship money, it's always a good idea to apply early before the money runs out. I think almost across the board, schools are more generous early on than they can be later on, when they're really, fitting people in to craft a diverse class. So that's another point of consideration. Beyond academic credentials and the GMAT or the GRE, how do you assess fit with the personality and sort of the culture and the demands of your MBA program? Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the eternal question, right?
Yeah, and it's the mystery.
It is the mythical thing, and it goes both ways. And I'm happy to share that with the audience, but the audience should also consider, when they're thinking about their schools, what sort of vibes and what fits with them. I mean, I think most of us are looking for resilience and adaptability, empathy. These are all things. So those soft skills, those emotional intelligence things that we look for. Of course, we pull that out in the interview questions that we ask. We do ask specific questions around being a force for positive change, because we want to know, have you made an impact in the world around you? That doesn't mean that you had to have founded a startup, in the nonprofit space, but are you in that mindset of looking for ways to make a positive impact? We also do video assessments with video essay questions, and the questions are very much geared towards looking for those soft skills that we're looking for. As silly as it sounds, it's kind of like the beer test. It's like, do I want to have a beer with this person, after the interview? And that might sound a little crass, but the point being is, you have to be a good person, because when you go to do a job interview afterwards, as much as they're going to be hiring you based on what they feel that your abilities are, it's also just going to be that sort of give and take of, human to human. And so you're really looking for people who have that right sort of balance between being confident in who they are and what their abilities are, but not crossing in the line into arrogance. And so we've had situations where we've had people with stellar packages and profiles, 770 GMAT, ticking all the right boxes, and you get into the interview and you realize, this just isn't really a good fit for who we are as a school and what we look for. So that's an example of where it goes beyond the GMAT. So those are just some of the ways that we assess students and ask them and what we look for. But it's also critical, I think, as people are reviewing different schools and sort of what the flavors are, so to speak, finding the ones that really matter to them. Because if you're looking at, any of the schools here, any of the schools in the rankings, you're going to get a good education. That's sort of almost a given in a way. So you really need to find those other things that are really going to enhance your experience and make for a better fit.
Luis, is there any secret to what you look for in an ideal applicant?
I fully agree with Brandon. I mean, we use several pieces of assessment to our candidates. We use the Gmat, they make essays, etc. But I think the most important part of the assessment is the personal interview with the program director, because it's what you get, what kind of person he is. As Brandon said, is he a good person? Is he open to other cultures? How is his family life? What kind of sports he plays? Is individual or not individual? So with that pieces of information, I mean, you can get an idea about what kind of person you are putting into your classroom. And I think this, I mean, the background is important. Soft skills are important, but the kind of, let's say, good person he is very important as well. And the way you think he will fit with the group, a multicultural group with several people coming from different nationalities. They stop for dinner at different times. They behave different in groups, works, etc. And that's very important for the health of the group and for the correct run of the master.
Right. Kim, do you have an answer to that?
Absolutely, the interview. Again, I know there's a lot of different criteria on paper that we look at, but the interview is where you really get to know the individual, to hear their story, where they're coming from, and to really assess what they'll bring into the classroom. So thinking of, those group projects, those, the classroom dynamic and the conversations that are had, what would they be able to really contribute, and how would they engage? How, what would they get as well from the experience? So the interview is key. Connecting also our candidates with current students and being able to gain feedback from those individuals, because they're in the classroom and they know, again, the culture, the dynamic. So that's something that is really important to us as far as getting that feedback, getting that opportunity to really get to know individuals through the process. Beyond that, I think, another element is really, having the chance. Obviously, it's a little bit limited right now, right? Given the certain restrictions as far as COVID, but having the chance to also visit the institutions, going back to Brandon's point, it's about trying it on for size for both, right? It's about, seeing whether that individual is a good fit for the class and for the program, but also if what we can deliver is the right fit for them. So we at this time are, working through virtual experiences and helping students to get to, have a little taste of what that culture and what the environment is like. But certainly we'll look forward to returning to those in-person visits as well.
Right, great. And Jim, I imagine we covered the waterfront on that, but if you have something to add, please do. And if not, I would ask another question, which is, what's the first thing you look for in a resume or a CV?
Sure. Well, you're right. I really echo everything that my colleagues have shared, although I will mention that because of our focus on coaching and development, we really do seek students who are willing to be coached, who are willing to listen to, accept, and act on feedback, because that can make a tremendous difference in their ability to be successful. But when I look at a resume, it's always interesting to look at career progression, but I'm looking for transferable skills. I'm looking for impact. I'm looking at what they have accomplished, because again, their past track record of success is going to be a good indication of what they're capable of doing in the future, especially with the support of our program. Right.
Luis, what do you look for when you first look at a resume or a CV and for a candidate?
Well, I try to understand the curriculum vitae as a whole, not just looking. Obviously, you look for the red lines. I mean, the studies or the professional experience. But as I told you before, there are several things that are important for me, such as hobbies, the kind of companies he has worked, if they have moved to many different companies, the time they've been staying in one single company, etc. So I pretend to see the to watch the curriculum vitae as a whole, and not really have got red lines.
How do you define a red line?
Yeah, red line, for example, graduate, non-graduate, or professional experience. That's red line. Obviously, you have to take that on account. But for example, for me, the GMAT is not a red line.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Brandon, what do you look for?
Yeah, actually, I do start with the extracurricular things, because oftentimes I'll start an interview with that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, sometimes you'll see in there that people might have, Luis mentioned sports. You might have a candidate and maybe she was, an Olympic speed skater, or, I look for things like that can give me insight into things that I can ask during the interview. For example, in that case, I find people who have done athletics at an elite level have a big amount of resilience in dealing with failure and getting back up when they're pushed down. And so those kind of things can help direct questions that I ask. When I'm reviewing it more for an admissions committee, yes, career progression is great. I'm not such a big person on how much turnover did you have and things like that, because I do think that there is sometimes a little bit of gaming about what were you really responsible for versus what were you part of. So oftentimes when I see that in a CV, I will drill down and say, oh, it says here that you were part of a $20 million project. What exactly did you do there? Well, sometimes it was, yeah, I led it. I had a team of 6 people, multifunctional, cross-functional team. Sometimes you can sort of peel back the layers and really get into what they did. So I tend to go a little bit down, seeing what they actually did in that, and then use that as a basis to kind of probe a little bit. Because I think, look, schools and applicants, we're always going to put on our best behavior, right? We want to impress the other as much as we can. So schools are always going to talk about, a lot of the things we talked about now, right? Which is great. And I think sometimes candidates do as well. So the faster that I can get an interview to a more real conversation, because there's nothing worse than admitting someone who, they're telling you what they think you want to hear, and we're telling them what they think they want to hear. And if they end up coming in, they're upset because, well, this isn't what you promised. And we're like, yeah, but you're not who we thought you were. So getting to that point of realness as quickly as possible, going back to that human touch. So I try to dig a little bit into the CV to see what clues are in there, to find out more about them, not to catch people out, but just to see who they really are.
Yeah, right. Kim, do you look at hobbies and extracurriculars on that resume?
I actually do. Yeah, I have to agree with these colleagues here, as far as not just what they've had experience with, but what have they done throughout the years, right? So during their undergraduate career, did they balance? Were they a student athlete, or were they in leadership positions? As they have developed in their career, have they been involved maybe in their community? So part of that is also thinking of the experience within the MBA. We offer so many events, so many opportunities for students to get involved. So it definitely requires somebody who can really prioritize and who can make the time to take advantage, because you want to leverage those opportunities in order to get the greatest return on your investment. And that's a pretty good indicator to see, okay, this is somebody who can really take it on, who is, a go-getter. They're willing to jump in and they don't want to miss out on these opportunities. As they mentioned, it really helps to shape the conversation as well within the interview.
True, when you really get a sense for the person. I mean, when you just look at where they went to school, what their grades were, what they're doing, that doesn't really tell you who they really are. And I think in those extracurriculars and hobbies, you get a sense for the person's passions, and a better window on, hey, what they're really interested in, what really makes them exciting. So Kim, you have the toughest question asked by any member of the audience. I want to give it to you. And it relates to, of all things, the things we love and we hate, rankings. This question is, the Financial Times ranking for Miami Herbert stayed the same in 2021 when compared to 2020, when many B schools did not participate. Any specific reason for not moving up in the ranking? How about that?
That's a very good question. For each rankings publication, there is different criteria, that we look at. This past year, of course, certainly has, well, I will say recent years, especially, it's been quite transformative for our institution. And any time that you're going through growth, you're going through transformation, it takes a while for sort of the result to catch up as far as, that outward, the reputation, all of the exciting things that we have been doing in terms of the exposure, the connections, the corporate partners. Right now, we're in the process of rolling out a new format, a sort of redesign to our full-time MBA. And so, again, there's time spent on really analyzing and building and saying, okay, if we're looking ahead to 2021 and saying we want to be able to launch and really roll out these changes, that takes a lot of the initiative and the time as far as organizing and preparing for those kind of things. So it's one of those opportunities that as we look at our broader vision, continuing to grow in not only the rankings, but in terms of the success of our graduates, right? What at the end of the day, we're all working towards. That is something that we certainly anticipate we'll begin to see in the next year or so. So I certainly think that not moving in the rankings is not a bad thing. The fact that we have continued to participate, as it was mentioned that, many schools may have decided to take a year off because of the circumstances. I think that's important to see as well.
Yeah, and I will just add some context to this. When you look at a ranking, you're looking in general at 100 programs.
Mm-hmm.
The creme de la creme programs in the world, because they in fact make the list. They are ranked. The vast majority of programs never achieve a ranking like the Financial Times. And, when you say there were many schools that did not participate, actually in the FT ranking, there were probably nothing more than a half dozen schools that refused to cooperate with the FT. The Economist was more of a problem. The other point to be made is that many of the US schools had declines in their international enrollments for their latest intakes as a result of the pandemic. And the FT rewards a lot of points for international aspects of a program that would likely hinder a US school's opportunity to move forward in that ranking. So that's all some context. Okay, last question is my favorite question, because when I visit a campus, I want to get together with students and ask them this: what are the 3 hallmark experiences of your MBA program? Now, Luis, I'm going to Madrid in September. And so what would your students tell me?
They will tell you that the experience in China has been marvelous. Probably the balance we have got with our professors between the academic and practitioner balance is very convenient for them. And the third will be Madrid.
Madrid.
Yeah, we are. We are warm people. We welcome everybody. Everybody feels at home with us. So I think it's important.
You hug a lot. You stay up late. You eat late. You drink well.
Yeah, and it's a funny city.
Brandon, the 3 hallmark experiences that your MBA students would describe to me.
Sure. In the program itself, it'd be the Living Management Project, which is a consulting-based project that lasts over 4 weeks with outside companies coming in with active business challenges. So I think that that's a very stressful, very rewarding moment in the program. The second thing I would say is actually kind of something you see within the European schools, which is the MBA, the MBAT, so the MBA tournament, which happens in France, which brings in about 20 business schools. The cohorts come together for a weekend of competition in various sports, maybe some parties, but it's a great way to meet and to network with people. So I think that's something that, while isn't RSM specific, is something that is a big part of many European programs, and RSM is no different. And then finally, we joked about the location before and about the weather that Rotterdam has, but quite frankly, the position that it has in Europe, geographically speaking, 40 minutes I can fly to London, within an hour I'm in Brussels, a train ride, a couple of hours I'm in Paris, I'm in Germany. So it's very easy to get around, and Rotterdam has the largest port in Europe. It is known as kind of a hub of transportation, and lest we forget, you're 30 minutes away from Amsterdam. So I mean, it is kind of a cool location, actually. You can get around, you can go skiing in the Alps in the winter, and you can go to the beach in the summer. So it would also be the location, although maybe not like Madrid or Miami, but location is all in how you define it, I suppose.
Great. Jim, your 3 things?
One of the highlights for many of our students is our GLOBASE program, Global Business and Social Enterprise, and it's an international consulting project with clients in developing countries, and they really feel like they make an impact, they make a difference while they're learning about international business. The Meet Inc. experience I talked about gets them off to such a great start, and many of them talk about the relationships that they develop through Meet Inc. that help shape their experience. And the last thing is just the relationships in general. Bloomington, Indiana, we have students who wonder about going to a top program in a small college town in Indiana. And the reality today, location doesn't make a difference. Our students work all over the country, all over the world, and have great networking opportunities. But when you bring in a class that is coming from all over the country, all over the world, they all come to Bloomington. No one was already living and working in Bloomington. Because of the nature of a college town, they live within a mile or 2 at the most from each other and from campus. It develops an incredibly strong community. And so the friends that they make really do become friends and colleagues for a lifetime.
That's great. Kim, your 3 things, and you get the last word.
All right. So for our students, I would say starting really with the network, we have, we've all talked about diversity in terms of cultural and geographic, origins, but beyond that, the class makeup is really unique in terms of the professional background, the academics. We have various dual degree programs that filter into essentially the full-time MBA program. And so having the chance to work alongside, engineers and future attorneys, future physicians, and business professionals alike, there's a lot of opportunity to build connections that will carry with you into your career. And we've seen over the years, there are some that really form partnerships and have even launched businesses, over the years. So that is one that, not only a hallmark in terms of the experience, because it helps them to broaden their perspective, to learn from others, but that has really been impactful in terms of their growth. The community, so beyond the network itself, the community that is the business school, the support that they receive is huge. Academic advisors, career coaches, their faculty, the support amongst their peers, amongst the students that are in the class with them as well, for Miami Herbert is just transformative. And lastly, I would say also our career advancement team, they work tirelessly putting on events, they have workshops, they bring employers, and of course we all have that dedicated support to our students, but it's something that especially in recent years for our team and for our students, I've really seen it transform and have been just really impressed with the arsenal of resources and the attention that they have dedicated to our students. So hands down, that is certainly impactful as these individuals, these students look to the next stage in their career.
That's great. Hey, what a pleasure it's been to spend this last hour with all of you. I really enjoyed it very much, and I really thank you for, giving your precious time to both me, CentreCourt, and of course the people who are watching now and who will watch in the future, because this event will be recorded and archived and pushed out on the web all over the place. So really, thank you so much. And I want to remind everyone that there's time now for info sessions with our panelists. And if you're wondering about the photograph that's behind Kim, I know the story. And let me just assure you that it's not MBA applicants trying to get into an elite program and a scramble for that, but instead it's Kim.
It is actually the Beatles. This is a photograph that was taken the night before they went on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Everyone needs to know how big a Beatles fan I am. I even have a lamp here, okay, of all their album covers. My goodness. Hey, thanks so much, Kim, Jim, Brandon, Luis. A real pleasure. And Luis, I want to see you when I go to Madrid in September. I am.
Oh, sure.
No.
Sure,
So
just let me know, and I will be very, very happy to introduce you in my school and show you around.
Yes, I will call you well in advance, and we will have a late night dinner on the sidewalks of Madrid with some of your students, I hope.
Definitely we will.
Thank you all, and thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for watching.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.